I taught my daughter our emergency signal when she was 8 years old. 3 knocks on any surface, table, wall, car window, meant, "Mom, I need you to get me out of this situation." We used it at boring family gatherings, uncomfortable doctor visits, even once at a movie theater when a date went wrong in her 20s. She's 33 now. Last Tuesday, while I sat in my living room reviewing what I thought was evidence to protect her from a financial predator, I heard 3 knocks on my front door. But it wasn't a call for help. It was a warning. By the time I understood what those 3 knocks really meant, I had already transferred $87,000 from my retirement account. By the time I pieced together the truth, my daughter was standing in my kitchen, holding a burner phone, coordinating the final phase of a con that had been running for 8 months. My name is Lorraine Harper. I'm 64 years old. I spent 26 years with the Chicago Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. I put away fraudsters, embezzlers, romance scammers, Ponzi operators. I knew every tell, every tactic, every red flag that separates legitimate opportunity from calculated theft. And I still didn't see it coming, because the person running the con was the one person I had trained myself never to suspect. My daughter. Let me tell you about my life before everything fell apart, because you need to understand what I had to lose. I live alone now in a 3-bedroom bungalow on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood called Chatham. It's the house Raymond and I bought in 1989 when we were young and optimistic and convinced that hard work and good values would build us a legacy worth passing down. The mortgage has been paid off for 6 years. The garden Raymond planted still blooms every spring. Hostas and black-eyed Susans that come back without me doing much of anything except pulling weeds and remembering. Raymond died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. He was 63 years old, and we were supposed to have 20 more years together. We were supposed to travel. New Orleans, Charleston, maybe even Ghana, to trace his family roots. Instead, I buried him at Mount Glenwood Cemetery on a Tuesday morning in October, while the leaves were still turning. The life insurance payout was $180,000. Combined with my police pension and the money we'd saved over 36 years of marriage, I was sitting on just over $520,000. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Enough to retire early if I wanted to. Enough to help my daughter if she ever needed it. Except Jasmine never asked for help. My daughter, everyone calls her Jazz, has always been fiercely independent. She graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in business administration, paid for mostly through scholarships and her own student loans that she insisted on handling herself. She got a job in medical device sales right out of college and worked her way up until she was pulling in close to $120,000 a year. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, drives a leased Audi, and from the outside, her life looks exactly like the kind of success Raymond and I worked so hard to make possible. We were close, Jazz and I. Not in the way some mothers and daughters are, finishing each other's sentences, shopping together every weekend, that sort of thing. Our relationship was quieter, more practical. She called me every Thursday evening, usually while she was walking home from the gym. We had Sunday brunch together twice a month at Valois Restaurant in Hyde Park, a little soul food place that's been there since before Jazz was born. She'd order the catfish. I'd get the smothered chicken. We'd talk about work, about the neighborhood, about whatever new restaurant or gallery opening she'd been to that week. She was private about her personal life, which I respected. She'd had a few serious relationships over the years, but nothing that stuck. She always said she was too focused on her career to settle down, and I believed her. Raymond used to worry that she'd end up alone, but I told him Jazz knew what she wanted. She'd find someone when the time was right. I should have paid more attention to how private she really was. Looking back now, I can see the pattern. Jazz never asked me for money, not once in her adult life. When her car broke down in her mid-20s, she handled it herself. When she wanted to take a certification course for work, she paid for it out of pocket. I was proud of her independence. I thought it meant I'd raised her right. What I didn't realize was that her refusal to let me into her financial life wasn't about independence. It was about control. About making sure I never looked too closely at how she was actually making her money. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story really begins on a Sunday in early March, 5 months ago. Jazz called me on Saturday night, and asked if she could bring someone to brunch the next day. Someone? I asked. As in a man someone? His name is Devin, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We met at a networking event a few weeks ago. I think you'll like him. I tried to remember the last time Jazz had introduced me to anyone she was dating. It had been at least 3 years, maybe longer. What does Devin do? I asked, falling into the maternal interrogation I'd been doing since she was 16. He's in finance, investment consulting. He's very smart, Mom. And before you start running background checks, yes. He's age appropriate? No. He doesn't have an ex-wife. And yes, he has a real job. I laughed. I wasn't going to run a background check. I absolutely was going to run a background check. Bring him by around 11, I said. I'll make my good coffee. The Sunday brunch Devin Richardson arrived at my house at exactly 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, March 10th. I remember the date because I wrote it down later when I started keeping notes. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with broad shoulders and the kind of posture that suggested either military background or expensive personal training. He wore dark jeans, a gray cashmere sweater, and brown leather boots that looked Italian. His watch was understated but clearly expensive. His handshake was firm without being aggressive. "Ms. Harper," he said, meeting my eyes. "Jazz has told me so much about you. It's an honor to meet a Chicago PD legend." Legend. That was his first move. Flattery, but specific flattery, not generic. He'd done his homework. "I wouldn't say legend," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "I just did my job." 26 years in financial crimes, Devin said, following Jazz into my living room. "That's not just doing a job. That's a career of protecting people when they're most vulnerable." He'd researched me, or Jazz had told him enough that he knew exactly what to say. I brought out coffee, French press, the good beans I saved for special occasions, and the lemon pound cake I'd made the night before. We sat in my dining room, the one Raymond and I had refinished together 10 years ago, and I watched the two of them together. Jazz was different, lighter. She laughed more easily than I'd heard in months, maybe years. She touched Devin's arm when she talked. She leaned into him slightly when he told a story about a disastrous client meeting. There was an ease between them that felt genuine. Devin talked about his work with the kind of casual confidence that comes from actually knowing what you're doing. He explained that he worked as an independent investment consultant, helping high-net-worth individuals structure their portfolios outside of traditional wealth management firms. "A lot of my clients are people who've been burned by big banks," he said, accepting a second piece of pound cake. "They're looking for someone who can give them access to opportunities that aren't available through standard channels." "What kind of opportunities?" I asked. It was a reflex. 26 years of interviewing people had made me constitutionally unable to let vague statements pass unchallenged. Private placements, mostly. Real estate syndications, venture debt, sometimes pre-IPO equity in companies that are still a few years from going public. The returns are higher because there's more risk, but for clients who understand the landscape, it can be very lucrative. "And you're registered with FINRA?" I kept my tone conversational, almost casual. "Just a question." Devin smiled, not defensively, but like he'd expected the question and appreciated it. "We operate under a different structure," he said. "Most of my clients are accredited investors, which means we're working within private placement exemptions under Regulation D. It's all perfectly legal, just not the kind of structure that requires traditional broker-dealer registration. It's actually more common than people realize." The answer was smooth. Too smooth, but not impossible. Regulation D is real. Private placements are real. And plenty of legitimate investment advisors work outside the FINRA system. If I hadn't spent 26 years listening to fraudsters explain their perfectly legal operations, I might not have noticed the rehearsed quality of his delivery, the way he anticipated my exact question, the way he framed legitimacy as a matter of structure rather than substance. But I noticed. I also noticed that Jazz was watching me while he answered. Not watching him, watching me. Gauging my reaction, I smiled and poured more coffee. The rest of brunch was pleasant. Devin asked thoughtful questions about my career. He wanted to know about specific cases, not in a gossipy way, but with genuine interest in how financial crimes actually get prosecuted. He asked about the Chicago PD's relationship with federal agencies. He asked about the difference between investigating fraud and investigating money laundering. Good questions. Smart questions. Questions that someone planning a fraud would want answers to. Or maybe I was being paranoid, Jazz announced as we were clearing plates that she and Devin had decided to move in together. He asked me last week, she said, her hand finding his across my kitchen counter. I'm giving up my lease at the end of the month. That's wonderful, I said, and meant it. Jazz looked happy. She looked settled in a way I hadn't seen since before her father died. Devin left his business card on my kitchen counter when they left. Black cardstock with raised silver lettering. Simple, elegant, expensive. Meridian Capital Advisors, Devin Richardson, Principal 180 North LaSalle Street, Suite 3400, Chicago, Illinois, 60601. I turned the card over in my fingers after they left. The address was real. 180 North LaSalle is a premium office building in the Loop. Suite 3400 suggested a high floor, corner office, the kind of space that costs serious money. I told myself I was being paranoid. I kept the card anyway. 3 weeks later, Jazz called me on a Thursday evening. Not her usual Thursday call. This one came early, around 6 o'clock, and her voice had a breathless quality that immediately put me on alert. Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Can I come over? Of course. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm great, actually. I need to tell you about something in person. She arrived 40 minutes later with takeout from Harold's Chicken Shack, our comfort food, the kind we'd eaten together since she was a child. We sat at my kitchen table with fried chicken and coleslaw between us, and she told me about the opportunity. Devin showed me something, she said, pulling out her phone. An investment fund that some of his clients are using. Mom, people are making 18 to 20% annual returns. Consistently. Every instinct I'd honed over 26 years started screaming. 18 to 20% annual returns is the number that separates aggressive but possible from almost certainly fraudulent. The stock market averages around 8% over time. Real estate investment trusts might hit 10 or 12% in a good year. Anything consistently above 15% is either incredibly risky or incredibly fake. Jazz, I said carefully, 18 to 20% is very high. That kind of return usually comes with very high risk. That's what I thought too. She leaned forward, excited. But Devin explained it. It's not stocks or traditional real estate. They're funding bridge loans for commercial developers, short-term high-interest loans that banks won't touch because of Dodd-Frank restrictions. The returns are higher because of the risk premium, but the loans are all secured by physical properties. If the developer defaults, the fund forecloses and sells the property. The explanation was plausible. Bridge lending is real. Dodd-Frank did make it harder for banks to fund certain types of commercial loans. Private lenders stepped into that gap, but 18 to 20% still felt wrong. What's the minimum investment? I asked. $50,000. But Mom, listen. Devin said if you're interested, he could get you into the next funding round. There's only room for a few more investors before they close it out. Artificial scarcity. Another red flag. Real investment funds don't have arbitrary closing dates unless they're trying to create urgency. Jazz, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm 64 years old. I can't take risks with my retirement money. She sat back and something crossed her face. Disappointment. Maybe frustration. I knew you'd say that, she said quietly. But Mom, I'm putting in $80,000, my entire savings. I wouldn't do that if I wasn't absolutely certain. That stopped me. $80,000 was real money. If Jazz was willing to bet her entire savings on this fund, she must believe in it, unless she was lying about investing. But why would she lie? Let me think about it, I said. She nodded, pulled a folder from her bag, and slid it across the table. Devin put together a prospectus for you. Read it. Ask questions. Do your due diligence. I know you will anyway. But Mom, this is real. This could change everything for both of us. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table and read every page of that prospectus. Meridian Income Fund 4, it was called. Professionally formatted with charts, graphs, legal disclaimers. The fund's strategy was described in careful, technical language. Debt financing for commercial real estate projects in secondary markets, secured by first-position liens on underlying assets. The performance history showed 8 years of consistent returns, 16 to 18% annually, with only one down year in 2020 when returns dipped to 12% during the pandemic. The management team was listed: Devin Richardson, principal, 2 other names I didn't recognize, and an advisory board that included someone with former VP, Commercial Lending, Northern Trust Bank, in their bio. It looked legitimate, but I'd seen fake prospectuses before. I'd seen forged performance charts and fabricated advisory boards and made-up management teams. I knew how easy it was to create the appearance of legitimacy with nothing behind it except graphic design and confidence. I needed to verify. The next morning, I called Detective Angela Williams. Angie and I had worked together for 11 years before I retired. She'd moved from Chicago PD to a financial crimes task force that worked joint operations with the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission. If anyone could help me verify whether Meridian Capital was legitimate, it was her. "Lorraine Harper," she said when she answered, her voice warm with genuine affection. "I was wondering when you'd call me. I heard you've been asking around about someone. How did you—" "Leonard Shaw called me. Said you'd hired him to run background on a guy named Devin Richardson. I figured you'd get to me eventually." I'd hired Leonard Shaw 3 days ago, a private investigator I'd worked with on fraud cases when I was still on the job. I'd asked him to dig into Devin's background quietly, without making waves. "I need you to tell me if Meridian Capital Advisors is registered anywhere," I said. "Illinois, Delaware, wherever they might have filed." "Already did that," Angie said. "The company is registered with the Illinois Secretary of State. Business license is active, filed in 2022. Devin Richardson is listed as the principal agent." "What about FINRA, SEC registration?" "No FINRA registration, but that's not necessarily a red flag if they're doing private placements under Reg D. They're not required to register as broker-dealers if they're only working with accredited investors. I checked with the SEC. No enforcement actions, no complaints filed." I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. What about Richardson personally? Clean, no criminal record, no civil suits except— She paused. "Okay, there are 2 civil suits, both settled out of court. One in 2018 in Miami, one in 2020 in Atlanta. I can't get the details because they were sealed as part of the settlements, but the docket numbers suggest they were contract disputes. Business disputes or personal?" "Business. Both plaintiffs were listed as investors." And there it was, the thing that didn't fit. Investors sued him twice? And he settled both times. Could mean he did something wrong and wanted to avoid trial. Could mean he settled to make nuisance lawsuits go away. Hard to say without seeing the actual complaints. I thanked Angie and hung up. 2 settled lawsuits. Not proof of fraud, but not great either. I called Dr. Jerome Patterson next, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on Ponzi scheme prosecutions. I asked him to review the Meridian Income Fund prospectus. He called me back 3 hours later. "Lorraine, on paper this looks legitimate. The structure is legal. The strategy is plausible. The returns are high but not impossible for bridge lending in secondary markets. But I can't verify any of the performance data. The prospectus cites an auditor, Whitmore and Associates, CPAs, but I can't find any record of that firm. No website, no state CPA license registrations, no business filings. The address listed is a residential building in Schaumburg." My stomach dropped. So the auditor is fake. Or it's a very small firm that doesn't maintain much of an online presence. But Lorraine, any legitimate fund handling this much money would use a reputable auditing firm. This feels wrong. I thanked Jerome and sat with what I'd learned. The company was real. Devin's background was mostly clean except for 2 sealed lawsuits, but the auditor couldn't be verified. Not enough to prove fraud, but enough to make me very, very careful. 2 weeks later, Jazz invited me to dinner at Devin's apartment. "I want you to see where I'm living now," she said. "And Devin wants to cook for you. He makes this amazing duck breast with cherry reduction." Devin's apartment was in a high-rise building on the Gold Coast, one of those glass towers with doormen and views of Lake Michigan that rent for $4,000 or $5,000 a month. The apartment itself was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, furniture that looked like it came from somewhere more expensive than IKEA. The dinner was perfect. Duck breast cooked medium rare, roasted root vegetables, a bottle of wine that Devin said he'd been saving for a special occasion. He was charming and attentive. He asked about my garden. He wanted to know what Raymond and I had been like when we first met. He made Jazz laugh with a story about accidentally booking a client dinner at a restaurant that turned out to be permanently closed. Over dessert, some kind of chocolate mousse situation that Jazz had clearly not made herself, the conversation turned to the fund. "Jazz mentioned you were thinking about investing," Devin said, his tone casual. "I wanted to make sure you don't feel any pressure. This is your retirement money. You should only invest if you're completely comfortable." It was the right thing to say. Exactly the right thing to say. Which made me suspicious. "I appreciate that," I said. "I've been doing some research. I had a colleague look at the prospectus." "Good," Devin said immediately. "You should absolutely do your due diligence. What did they think?" "They thought the structure looked sound, but they couldn't verify the auditor." Devin nodded, unfazed. "Whitmore & Associates is a small firm. They specialize in alternative investment vehicles, funds like ours that operate outside traditional banking structures. They're not one of the big names, which is actually why we use them. Lower fees, more personalized service." "Could I speak with them directly?" "Of course. I'll have my office send you their contact information." He said it so smoothly with such immediate agreement that I almost believed him. Almost. Jazz leaned forward. "Mom, I know you're being careful. I would be too. But I've been living with Devin for 3 weeks now. I've seen the quarterly statements from other investors. I've met some of his clients. This is real. I looked at my daughter, my smart, independent, successful daughter, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she'd found a good man and a good opportunity and that my instincts were wrong." "How much are you thinking about investing?" Devin asked. I hadn't decided, but sitting there in his expensive apartment with my daughter looking at me with such hope and certainty, I heard myself say, "$85,000. Jazz's face lit up. "Mom, that's perfect. That gets you into the preferred tier. Investors over $50,000 get priority allocation in future funding rounds." Priority allocation for future investments. Another sales technique. Get them in the door with one investment, then upsell them on the next one. But maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe this was legitimate, and I was seeing ghosts because I'd spent 26 years assuming everyone was lying. "Let me think about it over the weekend," I said. Devin raised his wine glass. "Take all the time you need. But the next funding round closes at the end of the month, so if you do decide to move forward, we'll need to get the paperwork done soon." There it was again. The deadline. The urgency. I drove home that night and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, staring at my dark house. Raymond would have told me to trust my gut, but my gut was telling me 2 different things: that something was wrong with Devin Richardson, and that my daughter genuinely believed in him. I went inside and signed the subscription agreement. I wired $87,000 to the account Devin provided, and I told myself I was protecting Jazz by staying close to the situation, by keeping myself positioned to watch what happened next. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be lies. The quarterly statement arrived 3 months later in mid-August. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single-page document showing my investment had grown to $90,400, a 4% return in 3 months, right on track for the projected annual return. Everything looked fine, Except for one small detail that I noticed only because I'd spent 26 years noticing small details. The statement had no auditor signature, no certification mark, no indication that anyone besides Devin Richardson had verified these numbers. I called the investor relations number listed on the bottom of the statement. It rang 4 times and went to a generic voicemail. You've reached Meridian Capital Advisors. Please leave your name and number, and someone will return your call. No receptionist, no company greeting, just voicemail. I left a message asking to schedule an in-person meeting at their office to review my account. 3 days went by with no response. On the 4th day, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Harper? This is Patricia calling from Meridian Capital. I got your message about wanting to schedule a meeting. Patricia sounded young, early 20s maybe. Her voice had the slightly uncertain quality of someone reading from a script. Yes, I said. I'd like to review my account in person. When is Devin available? Let me check his calendar. I heard computer keys clicking. He's actually out of the office this week, but I can schedule you for next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Does that work? Where's the office located? 180 North LaSalle, Suite 3400. I'll be there, I said, and hung up. Then I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I drove to 180 North LaSalle. The lobby of 180 North LaSalle was exactly what you'd expect from a premium loop office building. Marble floors, security desk, elevator banks with brass fixtures. The directory in the lobby listed hundreds of companies. I found Meridian Capital Advisors on the board. Suite 3400, 34th floor. I took the elevator up. The 34th floor had a reception area with glass doors and a young woman sitting behind a curved desk. A sign on the wall behind her read, Executive Office Solutions, Premium Workspace and Business Services, not Meridian Capital, Executive Office Solutions. I walked up to the desk. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I'm here to see Devin Richardson at Meridian Capital Advisors. She turned to her computer, typed something. And you are? Lorraine Harper. I'm a client. I called earlier this week about scheduling a meeting. More typing. Then a small frown. I'm sorry, Ms. Harper, but Meridian Capital doesn't have a dedicated suite here. They're a virtual office client. They use our mail, forwarding service, and conference room rentals. The floor seemed to tilt slightly beneath my feet. Virtual office? Yes, ma'am. They have a business address here, but no permanent office space. Mr. Richardson comes in maybe once or twice a month to pick up mail or use a conference room for client meetings. How long have they been a client? She hesitated. I'm not sure I should... It's fine, I said, keeping my voice pleasant. I'm just trying to understand the business structure. I'm considering a significant investment. She softened slightly. About 14 months, I think, but you'd have to speak with Mr. Richardson about their services. I just handle the front desk. I thanked her and left. In the elevator going down, I felt ice spreading through my stomach. Virtual office, mail forwarding service. Not a real business location, not a real company with employees and infrastructure, just an address on a business card. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, staring at the concrete wall in front of me, while my mind raced through everything I knew about how financial frauds work. The pattern was textbook. Impressive office address that turns out to be a virtual service. Performance charts with no verifiable auditor. Smooth-talking principal with a history of settled investor lawsuits. Artificial urgency around funding deadlines. I'd arrested people for running schemes exactly like this. But this wasn't just any fraud. This was my daughter's boyfriend. This was the man she was living with. This was the investment she'd put her entire savings into. Or had she? That thought stopped me cold. Jazz said she'd invested $80,000, but I'd never seen proof. No account statements, no wire transfer receipts, nothing except her word. What if she was lying? What if she'd known from the beginning that Devin was running a con? No, that was impossible. Jazz wasn't a criminal. She was my daughter. I'd raised her. I knew her, except I'd also trained her. I'd spent her entire childhood teaching her how to spot liars, how to read people, how to understand the mechanics of fraud. I'd brought case files home, I'd talked through investigations at the dinner table. I'd shown her, inadvertently, exactly how cons work. What if she'd been paying attention? I started the car and drove home. I needed to know exactly how deep this went. That evening, I called Detective Angela Williams. Angie, I need you to do me a favor, and I need you to not ask questions until I've finished explaining. That's not ominous at all, she said. Go ahead. I need detailed financial records on Devin Richardson. Credit cards, bank accounts if you can get them, travel history, everything. Lorraine, you know I can't access that without a warrant or a criminal investigation. I transferred $87,000 to an investment fund that I don't think exists. The office address is a mail forwarding service. The auditor can't be verified, and my daughter is living with the man who sold me on it. Silence on the other end. Then, Jesus Christ, Lorraine. I need to know if this is what I think it is before I involve Jazz. If I'm wrong, I've just accused her boyfriend of being a con artist for no reason. If I'm right, if you're right, your daughter is either a victim or an accomplice. The words hit like a physical blow, even though I'd been thinking the same thing. Can you help me? I asked. Give me 48 hours. While I waited for Angie, I did what I should have done from the beginning. I investigated Devin Richardson the way I would have investigated any suspect in a fraud case. I started with social media. Devin's LinkedIn profile showed exactly what he'd told me. Northwestern graduate, 10 years in finance. Current position as principal at Meridian Capital Advisors. But when I looked closely at his employment history, there was a gap. 3 years between 2017 and 2020 with no listed employer. I searched for Devin Richardson and Miami and investment fraud. Nothing came up in criminal databases. But I found something else. A dissolved company called Pinnacle Strategies Group that had filed for bankruptcy in 2019. Devin had been listed as a consultant. I called the former CEO, a man named Arthur Bellamy, who now ran a car dealership in Fort Lauderdale. Mr. Bellamy, my name is Lorraine Harper. I'm calling about Devin Richardson. I understand he worked for Pinnacle Strategies Group. Worked is a generous word, Bellamy said, his voice going cold. He consulted for us for about 18 months. Then he left under circumstances I'd rather not discuss. Was it related to client funds? A long pause. Are you thinking about doing business with him? I already have, that's why I'm calling. Then I'd advise you to get your money back immediately. I can't say more than that without my lawyer present. But if you've given Devin Richardson access to your assets, you need to protect yourself. He hung up. I sat with that conversation for a long time. Then I called Leonard Shaw, the private investigator. Leonard, I need surveillance. I need to know where Devin Richardson goes, who he meets with, what he does when he's not with my daughter. How long? 1 week, starting tomorrow. This is going to cost you, Lorraine. I don't care. Angie called me back 2 days later. I couldn't get bank records without a warrant, but I got credit card data through a contact at one of the bureaus. You're not going to like this. Tell me. Devin Richardson has 5 credit cards, all of them close to maxed out. Total debt, just under $80,000. And Lorraine, the charges, they're not business expenses. Luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, designer clothing stores, first-class airline tickets. He's living above his means. Way above. And there's more. I found flight bookings for November 15th. 2 tickets to Barcelona on a one-way flight. Cost $22,000. My hands went cold. 2 tickets. Who's the second passenger? The booking name lists J. Richardson. J. Richardson. Jazz. Angie, my daughter's name is Jasmine. She goes by Jazz, and she's not married to Devin. I know, but the ticket is under J. Richardson. They could have booked it that way for convenience, or they're planning to disappear, and they wanted the names to match. That's one possibility. I closed my eyes. What's the departure city? Chicago O'Hare, November 15th at 6:45 p.m. 6 weeks away. They were planning to run in 6 weeks, which meant I had 6 weeks to figure out what was really happening and whether my daughter was a victim or a criminal. Leonard Shaw's surveillance report came 3 days later. Devin Richardson didn't go to any office. He spent his days moving between coffee shops, hotel lobbies, and upscale restaurants. He met with different people, always well-dressed couples in their 50s or 60s, always at neutral locations, never the same place twice. Shaw had photographed one meeting at a restaurant in Evanston. He'd run the license plate of the couple Devin met with. Robert and Diane Foster, both 62 years old, living in a house worth just under $1 million. I called the Fosters. Diane answered. "Mrs. Foster, my name is Lorraine Harper. I'm calling because I believe we may have both done business with the same investment advisor, Devin Richardson at Meridian Capital." "Oh, yes," her voice brightened. "Devin has been wonderful. We've been working with him for about 6 months now. May I ask, have you invested in the Meridian Income Fund?" "We have. We put in $150,000 in April. We've already seen returns of over $6,000. It's been extraordinary." $150,000. "Mrs. Foster, have you ever visited Devin's office?" "No, actually. He always comes to us. He says it's more personal that way. And honestly, we appreciate not having to drive downtown." "Have you met anyone else from his company? Other employees, partners?" A slight pause. "Now that you mention it, no. It's always just been Devin. But he's been so professional, and the returns speak for themselves." "Have you received account statements?" "Yes, quarterly statements. They show our balance and the returns." "Is there an auditor signature on those statements?" Longer pause. I don't think so. Should there be?" I closed my eyes. "Mrs. Foster, I think you should consider getting an independent verification of your investment. I'm not trying to alarm you, but there are some red flags that concern me." "What kind of red flags?" "The kind that suggests Devin Richardson may not be operating a legitimate investment fund." I heard her breath catch. "Are you saying this is a scam?" "I'm saying I think you should protect yourself. Get a lawyer, request full documentation, and whatever you do, don't invest any more money." After I hung up, I made a list of everything I knew. Virtual office, not a real business location, asterisk. No verifiable auditor, asterisk. Principal with history of investor disputes, asterisk. Living well beyond stated income, asterisk. One-way tickets to Barcelona for 2, asterisk. Multiple investors, likely totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars, asterisk. No physical office, no employees, no infrastructure. This was a Ponzi scheme, or something very close to it. Devin was collecting money from investors, paying returns to early investors using money from later investors, and planning to disappear with whatever was left before the whole thing collapsed. The only question was, where did Jazz fit in? I invited Jazz to lunch at Valois on a Saturday afternoon. Just the two of us, like we'd done 1,000 times before. She arrived 15 minutes late, which wasn't like her. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual careful styling. "Sorry," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Devin and I were up late dealing with some client paperwork." "Client paperwork on a Friday night?" "The fund is growing faster than expected." "He's been swamped." I waited until after we'd ordered. Catfish for her, smothered chicken for me, sweet tea for both of us, before I started. "Jazz, I need to ask you some questions about your investment with Devin." Her shoulders tensed immediately. "Mom, just hear me out. When did you meet Devin? Really meet him?" "I told you, March, at a networking event." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot I'd found on her Instagram, a photo from a charity gala in January. In the background, slightly blurry but unmistakable, was Devin Richardson standing by the bar. This was posted on January 24th, 2 months before you claim you met him. Jazz stared at the photo. Something flickered across her face. Surprise? Fear? I couldn't tell. I think I saw him there. We didn't really talk. We formally met in March." "Jazz, don't lie to me." "I'm not lying." Her voice rose slightly, drawing looks from nearby tables. She lowered it. "We were at the same event. We might have exchanged a few words by the bar. I don't remember every conversation I have at networking events." I studied her face. The way her hand went to her necklace, a self-soothing gesture she'd had since childhood. The slight tension around her mouth. She was lying. I'd interrogated enough people to know when someone was lying, and my own daughter was sitting across from me, lying to my face. I went to Devon's office, and it's not an office, it's a mail forwarding service. Suite 3400 is a virtual business address. Devon doesn't have a real office. A lot of consultants use virtual offices, Mom. It doesn't mean anything. The auditor on the fund prospectus, Whitmore and Associates, doesn't exist. There's no state registration, no CPA license, nothing. The address listed is an apartment building. Jazz said nothing. Devon has $80,000 in credit card debt. He's living way beyond his means, and there are 2 one-way tickets to Barcelona booked for November 15th. Her face went pale. How do you know that? Because I'm a detective, Jazz. Or I was, and I know how to investigate fraud. This isn't fraud. Devon is running a Ponzi scheme, and I need to know if you're a victim or if you're helping him. The words hung between us. Jazz stood up abruptly. I can't believe you. You invested in this fund. You said you trusted me, and now you're accusing Devon, accusing us of what? Stealing from you? I'm asking you to tell me the truth. The truth is that you've never trusted my judgment. You've never believed I could make good decisions on my own. You've always treated me like a suspect instead of your daughter. Jazz, no, I'm done. When Devon answers every single one of your questions, when he proves that you're wrong, I want an apology. She grabbed her purse and walked out. I sat alone at the booth while the food arrived. The waitress looked at Jazz's empty seat and asked if I wanted her meal boxed up. I said yes, even though I knew Jazz wasn't coming back for it. Jazz stopped returning my calls after that lunch. Text messages went unanswered. My Sunday brunch invitations got one-word responses. Busy. Can't. Later. She was shutting me out, which meant one of 2 things. Either she was furious that I'd accused her boyfriend of fraud, or she knew I was getting too close to the truth and she was protecting herself. Leonard Shaw's surveillance continued. Over the next week, Devon met with 3 more couples. Shaw photographed all of them, ran their plates, gave me names. Harold and Evelyn Washington, 71 and 68, from Bronzeville, Thomas and Patricia Brennan. 59 and 56, from Oak Park Kevin and Stacy Whitmore. 63 and 60, from Naperville the Seas called the Washingtons. Harold answered. I recognized his voice immediately. He and Evelyn went to my church, Greater Mount Calvary Baptist. I'd seen them every Sunday for years. Evelyn was on the charity board. They were good people. Harold, it's Lorraine Harper. Lorraine, how are you, sweetheart? We haven't seen you at church in a few weeks. I've been dealing with some things. Harold, I need to ask you something sensitive. Have you and Evelyn invested money with a man named Devon Richardson? Pause. How did you know about that? My heart sank. How much? $200,000. It's our retirement savings and the money we've been setting aside for the grandkids' college. Lorraine, what's this about? $200,000. Harold and Evelyn Washington had given Devon Richardson $200,000. Harold, I think Devon is running a fraud. I think the investment fund doesn't exist and he's planning to disappear with the money. That's not possible. We've gotten quarterly statements. Our money has grown by almost $12,000. Those statements aren't real. The auditor doesn't exist. The business address is fake. Harold, I need you to trust me. Get a lawyer. Demand documentation. Request a withdrawal of your funds. Lorraine, I don't understand. Devon was introduced to us by someone we trust, someone who vouched for him completely. Who introduced you? Your daughter, Jazz. The world stopped. What did you say? Jazz. She called us about 3 months ago, said she'd been working with Devon and the returns were incredible. She said she'd invested her own money and wanted to share the opportunity with people she cared about. We've known Jazz since she was a little girl. We trust her like family. I couldn't breathe. Harold, I have to go. I hung up and sat in my living room with the phone in my hands, staring at nothing. Jazz had recruited them. My daughter had actively recruited Harold and Evelyn Washington, people who'd known her since childhood, people who trusted her, into a fraud. This wasn't Devon manipulating Jazz. This was Jazz working with Devon, or Jazz using Devon. I called Leonard Shaw. "I need you to follow my daughter." Shaw's report on Jazz came 48 hours later. Jasmine Harper, age 33, follows a pattern. Leaves Devon's apartment every morning at 7:15 a.m., drives to a coffee shop in Ukrainian Village, not her usual neighborhood. Meets with a rotating cast of individuals, always well-dressed, always professional-looking. Conversations last 20 to 30 minutes. No physical documents exchanged, but frequent note-taking. Returns to Devon's apartment around 6 p.m. One anomaly. On Wednesday afternoon, observed making a call from her car outside a currency exchange on Milwaukee Avenue. Call lasted 6 minutes. Immediately after, entered the currency exchange and was inside for 11 minutes. Attached to Shaw's report were photographs. Jazz sitting across from an older couple at a coffee shop, smiling, gesturing with her hands. Jazz in her car, phone pressed to her ear, her face serious and focused. Jazz coming out of the currency exchange carrying a manila envelope. I looked at the photos for a long time, then I called Detective Angela Williams. "Angie, I need your help, and I think we need to involve the FBI. Tell me everything." I did. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every red flag, the virtual office, the fake auditor, the Barcelona tickets, the multiple investors, the amounts, at least $500,000 that I could verify, probably more, and Jazz. Her recruitment of the Washingtons, her secret meetings, the currency exchange. When I finished, Angie was quiet for a long moment. "Lorraine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. If we investigate this and we find evidence that Jazz is complicit, not a victim but an active participant, can you handle that?" Could I? Could I handle my daughter being arrested, going to trial, going to prison? "I need to know the truth," I said, "whatever it is." "Okay, here's what we're going to do. The FBI has a division that handles investment fraud. I have a contact, Special Agent Marcus Coleman. He's good, and he's discreet. I'll brief him on what we have. But Lorraine, once we bring in the FBI, this becomes an official investigation. You won't be able to control how it unfolds." Wait, the user said no Marcus. Let me change that name. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. The FBI has a division that handles investment fraud. I have a contact, Special Agent Raymond Torres. He's good and he's discreet. I'll brief him on what we have. But Lorraine, once we bring in the FBI, this becomes an official investigation. You won't be able to control how it unfolds." "I understand." "And if Jazz is involved, she'll be arrested along with Devon." "I understand," I said again, even though I didn't, even though the thought of my daughter in handcuffs made me want to vomit. "There's one more thing we need. We need Devon on tape, making the investment pitch and asking someone to commit funds. In Illinois, you can record a conversation you're a party to without the other person's consent. If you can get him to meet with you and make another pitch, he won't meet with me. He's been avoiding me since Jazz told him about my questions. Then we need someone else, someone he doesn't know is connected to you, someone who can pose as a potential investor." I thought about that. Then I had an idea. My late husband had a sister, Claudette. She's 66, retired from teaching, lives in Evanston. She has money. She fits the profile of Devon's typical target. Would she be willing to wear a wire? If I explain what's at stake, yes. Set it up. It took me 3 days to convince Claudette. She'd loved Raymond. She loved Jazz. The idea that Jazz might be involved in a fraud nearly broke her, but she agreed to help. "If my niece has gotten herself into something terrible," Claudette said, "then she needs to face the consequences. And if she's innocent and just being used, then we need to get her away from this man." I gave Claudette her script. She'd heard about Meridian Capital from a friend. She had retirement savings she wanted to invest. She was looking for something more aggressive than her current portfolio. I gave her Devon's business card. She called him. He called back within 2 hours. warm and professional and eager to meet. They scheduled coffee for the following Tuesday. Agent Torres provided the wire, a tiny recording device that clipped to Claudette's bra, connected to her phone. She'd record the entire conversation. All we needed was for Devin to make his pitch, to quote returns, to ask for money, to provide account details for the wire transfer. That would be enough for the FBI to move. Tuesday morning, I sat in Agent Torres's surveillance van 2 blocks from the coffee shop where Claudette and Devin were meeting. I listened through headphones as my sister-in-law made small talk with the man who was defrauding me. And then I heard something that changed everything. Devin's voice came through crystal clear. "Mrs. Harper, I appreciate you reaching out. Your brother-in-law Raymond spoke very highly of you before he passed. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. Raymond was a good man." "He was. And he'd want to make sure you're taken care of. That's why I'm glad we're having this conversation." "Claudette, your fund has gotten excellent recommendations. I understand the returns are quite impressive. We've been very fortunate. Our investors have seen consistent returns in the 16 to 20% range annually. It's not magic. It's just smart positioning in markets that traditional banks won't touch." The pitch continued. Devin was smooth, confident, hitting every point. He described the fund structure. He mentioned the minimum investment, $50,000. He talked about the next funding window closing at the end of October. Everything we needed. Then Claudette asked, "And how would I transfer the funds?" "I'll send you wiring instructions. The account is with a credit union in Indiana. We use smaller institutions because they move faster than the big banks. Your money would be working for you within 72 hours. 72 hours. By the time anyone realized the fund was fake, the money would be gone. Agent Torres was taking notes, nodding. This was good. This was everything we needed. And then I heard something in the background of the recording. A voice, female, saying, "Do you want your usual oat milk latte?" It was muffled, distant, but I recognized it immediately. Jazz. My daughter was at the coffee shop. Agent Torres looked at me. That's my daughter." He picked up his radio. "Shaw, do you have eyes inside the coffee shop?" Leonard Shaw's voice crackled back. "Affirmative. The daughter just arrived. She's sitting at a table near the back. She has a laptop open." My heart was pounding. "She's just working. She probably doesn't even know Devin is meeting someone." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Through the headphones, I heard Devin say, "Excuse me for just one moment, Mrs. Harper." Footsteps, movement, then Devin's voice, quieter now, like he'd stepped away. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Jazz's voice. "Just working. Is that your 10 o'clock? "Yeah, potential investor. Looks good. How much?" "She's got at least 200 in liquid assets. I'm thinking I can get her in for 100. $100,000. My sister-in-law, Jazz. "Good. We need to hit our number before the 15th. "We will. Stop worrying." "I'm not worrying. I'm managing risk. There's a difference." Devin laughed. "You sound like your mom." And then Jazz said something that made my blood run cold. "My mom is the reason we need to move the timeline up. She's asking too many questions. We need to close out the remaining targets and get out of Chicago sooner than we planned." Silence. Agent Torres looked at me, his expression careful, controlled. "Lorraine, keep recording," I said. Devin, "You think she's on to us?" Jazz, "I think she suspects something's off with you, but she doesn't know about me yet. She still thinks I'm the victim. Can you keep her distracted for another 3 weeks?" "I'm trying. I've been avoiding her calls. But if she pushes harder, if she starts digging into my finances..." "She won't. You said she respects your privacy." "She does. But she's not stupid, Devin. She spent 26 years investigating fraud. If she looks closely enough, then don't let her look. You're her daughter. She trusts you." Jazz laughed. It was bitter, humorless. "She trusted me. Past tense. She still does. You said yourself she thinks I'm manipulating you. Which is the only reason I'm still in her house for Sunday dinners and not being interrogated in a police station." My hands were shaking. Agent Torres reached over and turned off my headphones. "Lorraine, I need you to stay calm." I looked at him. "My daughter is running a con. She's not the victim. She's the—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Torres, we need to let this play out. Your sister-in-law is still in there. Devin's still making his pitch. We need him to ask for the wire transfer, and we need her to get out safely." I nodded, but I couldn't feel my face. Torres turned my headphones back on. Devin had returned to the table with Claudette. The pitch continued. He provided the wiring instructions. Claudette said she'd think about it and get back to him within a few days. Perfect. The meeting ended. Shaw's voice. Both subjects leaving the coffee shop, Devin heading east on foot, the daughter remaining inside. "Stay with the daughter," Torres said. I ripped off my headphones and opened the van door. "Lorraine, wait." I didn't wait. I walked into that coffee shop and I found my daughter sitting at a corner table with her laptop open, typing something. She looked up when I approached. For just a second, one brief, unguarded second, I saw fear flash across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by surprise. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I sat down across from her. "I need you to tell me the truth, Jazz. Right now. No more lies." She closed her laptop slowly. "I don't know what you're talking about. You were just talking to Devin about targets and timelines and getting out of Chicago." I heard everything. Her face went completely still. "You were recording him." I was. "That's illegal in Illinois without consent." "Actually, it's not. Illinois allows one-party consent recording. Claudette consented to being recorded. Everything Devin said to her is admissible." Jazz's jaw tightened. "Claudette was here?" "She was, and she recorded every word of Devin's pitch, including the part where you asked him how much and discussed hitting your number before the 15th. We stared at each other across the table. My daughter, the little girl I'd raised, the teenager I'd taught to drive, the woman I'd celebrated at her college graduation, looking at me with the flat, calculating expression of someone who'd just been caught. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been doing this?" She didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters to me." She looked away, out the window at the street beyond. When she looked back, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Since Dad died. 3 years. My daughter had been running cons for 3 years. "Why?" "Because I could. Because I was good at it. Because you spent my entire childhood teaching me how to spot a mark, and I finally figured out how to become one." The words were a knife. "Jazz!" She stood up abruptly. "We're done here, Mom. You got what you wanted. You caught me. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it." She grabbed her laptop and walked toward the door. I wanted to follow her. I wanted to grab her arm and force her to stay and explain and apologize and tell me this was all some terrible mistake. But Agent Torres appeared beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "Let her go. We have enough." I watched my daughter walk out of the coffee shop and disappear into the Chicago morning. And I understood, finally, what those 3 knocks at my door had really meant. Not a call for help. A warning. She'd known I was investigating. She'd known I was getting close. And she'd tried to warn me, in her own way, to back off before I found the truth. But I hadn't listened, and now there was no going back. The FBI arrested Devin Richardson 2 days later. They waited until he was alone, leaving his apartment building on a Thursday morning. Agent Torres and 3 other agents approached him on the sidewalk, badges out, voices calm and professional. I wasn't there to see it. But Leonard Shaw was, and he sent me the photos. Devin in handcuffs, his expensive clothes looking suddenly cheap under the harsh morning light, his face showing the first cracks in that smooth confidence I'd seen across my dining room table. They brought him to the FBI field office on West Roosevelt Road. They didn't arrest Jazz. Not yet. Agent Torres called me that afternoon. "We need her to think she's safe. We need her to make a move, access accounts, contact co-conspirators, try to run. The moment she does any of those things, we'll have additional charges." "You're using her," I said. We're building a case. There's a difference. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand they arrest her immediately. Get it over with. Stop this terrible waiting. But I knew Torres was right. The stronger the case, the more likely a conviction. And if Jazz was going to face consequences for what she'd done, those consequences needed to stick. Jazz called me 3 hours after Devon's arrest. Her voice was shaking. "Mom, something's happened. The FBI arrested Devon. They came to his apartment. They took his laptop, his files, everything." I'd prepared for this call. I'd practiced what I would say, how I would sound. "What did they arrest him for?" "They said wire fraud, investment fraud." "Mom, this is insane. Devon didn't do anything wrong. This is a mistake." "Jazz, where are you right now?" "I'm at the apartment. They searched it. They went through everything. They asked me questions about the fund, about Devon's business, about—" Her voice broke. "Mom, I'm scared." Every instinct I had as a mother wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, to protect her the way I'd protected her when she was small and the world seemed too big and frightening. But she wasn't small anymore, and she wasn't innocent. "Did you tell them the truth?" I asked. Silence. "Jazz, did you tell the FBI the truth about your involvement with Devon?" "My involvement? Mom, I'm a victim here. I invested my savings just like you did, just like everyone else." "Stop lying to me." "I'm not. I know about the coffee shop. I know about your conversation with Devon. I know you've been recruiting investors. I know about the Washingtons, about the $200,000 they gave you because they trusted you like family." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "Are you working with the FBI?" "Yes." Another silence. When she spoke again, the fear was gone. Her voice was flat, empty of emotion. "Then we don't have anything more to talk about. Jazz, please. Come in voluntarily. Cooperate. Tell them everything. It will be better for you if—" "Better for me? Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what's going to happen now? You're going to face consequences for stealing nearly $1 million from people who trusted you." She laughed. It was a terrible sound. "You really think Devon and I only took $1 million? Mom, you really don't know anything." The line went dead. I didn't hear from Jazz for 3 days. Agent Torres kept me updated. She'd emptied Devon's apartment. She'd closed her own bank accounts. She'd missed 2 scheduled client meetings. Her phone was going straight to voicemail. "She's running," Torres said, "or preparing to. The Barcelona tickets are for November 15th. That's still 2 weeks away. She might have backup plans. Fraudsters like this always do." "Fraudsters like this," I repeated. "You mean my daughter?" Torres looked at me with something close to sympathy. "I'm sorry, Lorraine. I know this isn't easy." Easy. What a small, insufficient word for watching your only child transform into someone you don't recognize. On the 4th day, I received a text from an unknown number. "You want answers? Come to Devon's apartment, 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. If you bring the FBI, you'll never hear from me again." I knew I should call Torres immediately. I knew going alone was exactly what they tell you never to do in every training manual, every safety protocol, every lesson learned from cases gone wrong. But this was my daughter, and I needed to understand. I arrived at Devon's building at 7:45. The doorman recognized me from my previous visits, when Jazz had been showing me her new life, her successful boyfriend, her bright future that was all built on lies. "Ms. Harper," he said, nodding me through. I took the elevator to the 23rd floor. The door to Devon's apartment was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, every sense alert. "Jazz?" "In here." She was sitting in the living room, the same room where Devon had served me duck breast and expensive wine and sold me on his fraudulent fund. She looked different, thinner. Her hair was pulled back severely. She wore jeans and a black sweater, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked like someone preparing to disappear. "You came alone?" she asked. "You asked me to." That's not the same as actually doing it. You could have FBI agents in the hallway right now. I don't. She studied me for a long moment, then seemed to decide I was telling the truth. Sit down, Mom. We need to talk. I sat on the couch across from her. The same couch where I'd cried after her arrest, except she hadn't been arrested yet. That was still coming. Devon's cooperating, Jazz said. They offered him a deal. Reduced sentence if he testifies against his co-conspirators. Against you, against me, against the others. What others? She smiled without humor. You thought it was just me and Devon? Mom, this operation has been running for 18 months. There are 5 other people involved. Devon was never the mastermind. He was just the front man, the face. My stomach dropped. Who's the mastermind? I am. She said it simply, without pride or shame. Just a fact. Walk me through it, I sadly said. I need to understand. Why? So you can testify more effectively? So I can understand how I raised someone capable of this. That landed. I saw it hit her, saw something flicker across her face that might have been pain. You want to know how this started? She leaned back. Dad died and left you $500,000. You sat on it. Did nothing with it. Just let it sit in your savings account earning 0.5% interest while you mourned. I was grieving. You were wasting an opportunity. I looked at that money and I thought, I could double this in 2 years. I could make something of it. And then I thought, why stop with Mom's money? Why not find other people with money they're not using wisely and put it to work? You mean steal it? I mean reallocate it to someone who could actually do something with it. The audacity of it took my breath away. Jazz, you stole from the Washingtons, from people who trusted you, who loved you. The Washingtons have 3 rental properties and a pension worth $70,000 a year. They'll be fine. They gave you their grandchildren's college fund. Community college exists. The grandkids will survive. I stared at my daughter, at this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and I felt something break inside me. How much? I asked. Total, how much did you steal? $943,000. 7 families. Plus your $87,000 makes just over $1 million. We were aiming for 1.5 before we left the country, but you ruined that. $1 million. My daughter had orchestrated $1 million fraud. The Barcelona tickets, I said. November 15th. You and Devon were going to run. Were, past tense. Devon's in custody. The accounts are frozen. The FBI has everything. She looked at me with something that might have been admiration or might have been contempt. You really did your homework, Mom. I'm almost impressed. Don't. Don't what? Don't act like this is some game where you're proud I figured out the puzzle. People's lives are destroyed. Retirement savings, gone. College funds, gone. The Washingtons might lose their house because of you. The Washingtons will be fine. Everyone will be fine. That's the thing about fraud victims. They're victims of their own greed. They saw 20% returns, and they stopped asking questions. They wanted easy money, and they got conned. That's on them as much as it's on me. The coldness in her voice was worse than anything else. When did you become this person? I asked. I've always been this person. You just never looked closely enough to see it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Jazz stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. You know what's funny? She said. Devon thinks he's getting a deal by cooperating. He thinks if he testifies against me, he'll get 8 years instead of 15. But what he doesn't know is that I've been documenting everything from the beginning. She pulled out her phone, swiped through something, then turned it to show me. A video file. Devon, sitting at this very table, talking to someone off camera. The key is making them feel special, like they're getting access to something exclusive. Once they feel like they're on the inside, they stop questioning. Jazz stopped the video. I have 47 hours of recordings. Devon planning the cons. Devon pitching investors. Devon discussing how to launder the money through offshore accounts. I've been recording him since the day we started working together. Why? Insurance. I'm 33 years old with no criminal record and a clean reputation. Devin's 38 with 2 sealed lawsuits and a bankruptcy. Who do you think a jury is going to believe? The young woman who was manipulated by an older, experienced con artist? Or the con artist himself? I felt sick. You were planning to betray him all along. I was planning to protect myself. There's a difference. Jazz, those recordings won't help you. You're on them too. You're recorded recruiting investors discussing the fraud. Actually, I'm not. I'm very careful about what I say on camera. I ask questions. I express concerns. I sound like someone who's uncertain, who's being pushed into something she doesn't fully understand. Devin, on the other hand, explains everything in detail. She'd thought of everything. My daughter had planned this operation with the kind of meticulous detail I'd use to build cases against criminals. She'd learned from me. She'd weaponized the lessons I'd taught her about evidence and documentation and protecting yourself from co-conspirators. The FBI won't care about your recordings, I said. They have bank records, wire transfers, testimony from victims. They have you on tape at that coffee shop discussing targets and timelines. That coffee shop recording is inadmissible. You had Claudette wear a wire without Devin's consent. Illinois is a one-party consent state. Claudette consented to being recorded. But I didn't. And I was recorded too. Any lawyer worth their retainer will get that thrown out. She was right. She might actually be right. So what's your play? I asked. You're going to claim Devin manipulated you? That you were an innocent victim of an older, sophisticated fraudster? That's exactly what I'm going to claim. And with my recordings, it'll be believable. Jazz, you recruited the Washingtons. You brought them into this fraud personally. I mentioned Devin's services to them. I didn't force them to invest. There's a difference. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. I couldn't be in this room with this person who sounded like my daughter, but thought like a sociopath. You're not going to get away with this. Maybe not, but I'm going to try. And even if I'm convicted, my sentence will be half what Devin's is. Maybe less. First-time offender, clean record, good lawyer, sympathetic narrative. I'll be out in 5 years. Maybe 3 with good behavior. She said it like she was discussing a business plan, risk assessment, return on investment. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I asked. That my daughter will only spend 3 to 5 years in federal prison? I don't care how you feel, Mom. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. When? I asked. When did you stop caring? When I realized that you cared more about strangers than you did about your own family. You spent 26 years putting criminals in prison while Dad and I ate dinner alone. You missed my school plays because you were interviewing suspects. You forgot my 16th birthday because you were working a case. You chose your job over us. Every single time. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You were a cop first and a mother second. And I learned from that. I learned that the world is full of people who will take advantage of you if you let them. I learned that trust is a weakness. I learned that the only person you can really count on is yourself. I taught you to be independent. I didn't teach you to be a thief. You taught me that morality is flexible, that sometimes you have to break the rules to get justice. You've bent the law 100 times during investigations, unauthorized surveillance, witness coercion, evidence obtained through questionable means. You did it because you believed the ends justified the means. I'm doing exactly the same thing. I was putting criminals in prison. You became one. Perspective, Mom. That's all it is. I looked at my daughter, at her cold eyes and her justifications and her absolute conviction that she'd done nothing wrong. And I understood that I'd already lost her. Not to Devin, not to the fraud. I'd lost her years ago, and I'd been too busy working cases to notice. But that didn't change what I had to do now. I pulled out my phone. Jazz's expression shifted. Who are you calling? Agent Torres. Mom, don't. I dialed. I'm giving you one chance, I said. Come with me voluntarily. Cooperate. Tell the truth. Face this with whatever dignity you have left. I'm not going to prison because you need to feel like you did the right thing, Torres answered. Lorraine? I'm at Devon's apartment. Jazz is here. She's confessed to running the fraud. She's planning to flee. Jazz's face went white with rage. You're wearing a wire. No, I'm not. I'm just telling the truth. Torres, don't let her leave. We're 5 minutes away. Jazz grabbed her bag and headed for the door. I stepped in front of her. Move, Mom. No. I will hurt you to get out of here. Then hurt me. We stared at each other. My daughter, my only child. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep and taught to ride a bike and sent off to college with tears in my eyes, raising her hand like she might actually hit me. And then the decision left her eyes. Her hand dropped. I'll never forgive you for this, she said quietly. I'll never forgive myself for not seeing this sooner. Agent Torres arrived 4 minutes later with 3 other agents. They entered the apartment with weapons drawn, which felt excessive until I remembered that Jazz had just threatened to hurt me to escape. Jasmine Harper, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and interstate transportation of stolen property. Torres read her rights while another agent put handcuffs on her wrists. Jazz didn't resist. She didn't cry. She didn't even look at me. She looked straight ahead, her face completely blank as they led her out. I stood in that empty apartment for a long time after they left. I thought about the first time Jazz had used our 3-knock signal. She'd been 8 years old, trapped in a conversation with Raymond's brother about water treatment facilities, and she'd knocked 3 times on the dining room table. I'd invented an emergency, a pie burning in the oven, and rescued her. She'd hugged me afterward and said, "Thanks, Mom. You always know how to save me." I'd thought I was teaching her to trust me. Instead, I'd taught her that escape was always possible, that if you were clever enough, you could get out of any situation, even the consequences of your own actions. Agent Torres found me still standing there 20 minutes later. Lorraine, you should go home. How many? I asked. How many what? How many victims? She said 7 families. Is that accurate? Torres pulled out a small notebook. 7 families that we've identified so far, but we're finding more. She had a list, potential targets, people she'd researched but hadn't approached yet. The Washingtons, the Fosters, the Brennans, the Whitmores, a couple named Rodriguez, another named Thompson, and your sister-in-law Claudette was on the list too. Jazz was planning to recruit her next. Total losses? $943,000 in confirmed transfers. Devon had another $160,000 in cash that we recovered from a safe deposit box. Some of it might be recoverable, but most of it's already been moved through enough accounts that it'll take years to trace. Almost $1.1 million. What happens now? I asked. Devon's cooperating. He's providing details about the offshore accounts, the money laundering process, everything. In exchange, he'll plead guilty to reduced charges. 8 to 10 years, probably. And Jazz? Torres hesitated. She's not cooperating. She's claiming she was manipulated by Devon. Her lawyer is building a defense around her being a victim of coercive control. That's bullshit. I know, and so does the prosecutor. But juries are unpredictable, especially when the defendant is a young woman with no prior record claiming she was manipulated by an older man. We've seen it work before. So she might get away with this. She's not getting away with anything. Best case scenario for her, she gets 5 to 7 years. Worst case, she gets 15. Either way, she's going to prison. Prison. My daughter was going to prison. I'd put people in prison. Hundreds of them. I'd felt righteous about it. Satisfied. Convinced I was making the world safer. I'd never once imagined I'd put my own daughter there, too. Go home, Lorraine, Torres said gently. There's nothing more you can do here. He was wrong. There was one more thing I had to do. 3 months later, the trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented bank records, wire transfers, testimony from all 7 victim families, and Devon's cooperation agreement. They showed the jury the fake prospectus with the non-existent auditor. They played portions of the recording from the coffee shop meeting with Claudette. Jazz's defense attorney, an expensive lawyer paid for with money I'd save for her wedding someday, argued that she'd been manipulated, that Devin was a sophisticated con artist who'd preyed on a young woman still grieving her father's death, that Jazz had genuinely believed the fund was legitimate. They showed the jury photos of Jazz at her father's funeral, young, devastated, vulnerable. They brought in a psychologist who testified about coercive control and how intelligent victims can be manipulated without realizing it. It was compelling. It might have even worked if the prosecution hadn't found Jazz's notebook. Leonard Shaw had discovered it during his surveillance. A leather journal Jazz kept in her car. She'd been writing in it during her coffee shop meetings with potential investors. The FBI had seized it during her arrest. Inside were detailed notes about each target, their net worth, their vulnerabilities, the specific approach that would work best with each one. Harold and Evelyn Washington. Church connection, appeal to faith and community. Retirement savings of $350,000. Target amount, $200,000. My sister-in-law Claudette. Widowed, lonely, trusts family. Raymond's sister use his memory. Estimated assets $400,000 plus. Target amount $150,000. In Jazz's own handwriting, dated over 18 months, was proof that she'd planned every detail of the fraud. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. They found her guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was a woman in her late 60s named Margaret Okafor. She'd been a prosecutor before her appointment to the bench. She'd seen every kind of fraud, every type of manipulation. She looked at Jazz for a long moment before she spoke. Ms. Harper, you had every advantage. Education, intelligence, opportunity. You chose to use those advantages to prey on people who trusted you. You targeted elderly victims, people in your own community, people who knew you as a child. The betrayal of that trust is profound. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release and full restitution to all victims. 12 years. Devin got 8. Jazz got 12 because the judge had seen through the manipulation defense, because the notebook proved premeditation, because Jazz had recruited victims personally. I sat in the courtroom gallery and watched my daughter's face as the sentence was read. She didn't cry. She didn't react. She just stared straight ahead, the same blank expression she'd had when they arrested her. They led her out in handcuffs. She didn't look at me. 6 weeks after sentencing, I received a letter from FCI Alderson, the federal prison in West Virginia where Jazz was serving her sentence. The envelope had been opened and resealed, prison security protocol. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Jazz's careful script. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. But I need you to know that everything I said that night in Devin's apartment was a lie. Except one thing. I do blame you. I blame you for teaching me that the world is full of people who will take advantage of you if you let them. I blame you for showing me that trust is a weakness. I blame you for making me believe that the only way to survive is to be smarter, colder, and more ruthless than everyone else. You taught me those things by being a cop, by choosing strangers over your family, by putting your job first, by making me feel like I had to earn your attention by being perfect, by being independent, by never needing anything from you. I learned, and I applied the lessons. You spent 26 years teaching me how criminals think. You just never expected me to become one. I don't want your forgiveness. But I want you to know, I became who I am because of who you were. And now we both have to live with that. Jazz. I read the letter 3 times. Then I burned it in my kitchen sink. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was true enough to hurt, and I couldn't carry that hurt and still function. Jazz was in prison because of her choices, not mine. She'd had every opportunity to choose differently at every step, to stop recruiting victims, to refuse Devin's partnership, to walk away. She'd made her choices, and so had I. 6 months after Jazz's sentencing, I started volunteering with a support group for fraud victims. Every Thursday evening, I sat in a church basement in Bronzeville with people who'd lost everything to scams. Romance frauds, investment schemes, identity theft, elder financial abuse. Harold and Evelyn Washington came sometimes. We didn't talk much. The betrayal was still too raw. But they'd nod at me across the room, and I'd nod back. A small acknowledgement that we were both trying to heal. On the 1-year anniversary of Jazz's arrest, I was asked to speak at the group. I stood up in front of 30 people and told them my story. My name is Lorraine Harper. I'm 64 years old. I spent 26 years with the Chicago Police Department, Financial Crimes Unit. I put away fraudsters, embezzlers, Ponzi operators. I knew every red flag. I'd seen every variation of every scam. And I still got conned. By my own daughter. I told them about the virtual office, the fake auditor, the too good returns, all the red flags I'd noticed and then ignored because I wanted to believe Jazz was better than the criminals I'd spent my career catching. People ask me how I didn't see it coming. The truth is, I did. I saw every warning sign. I ignored them because she was my daughter, because I wanted to trust her more than I wanted to protect myself. I was wrong. And being wrong cost me $87,000. It cost 7 other families nearly $1 million total. It cost Harold and Evelyn Washington their grandchildren's college fund. It cost the Fosters their retirement security. But more than that, it cost me my daughter. I paused. The room was completely silent. Jazz is serving 12 years in federal prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 8. She'll be 41 years old when she gets out, if she gets out on her first attempt. I'll be 72. I don't know if I'll visit her. I don't know if I'll write to her. I don't know if there's any relationship left to salvage. What I do know is this. If someone you love is pulling you into something that feels wrong, trust yourself. Even if it means losing them. Even if it means admitting that the person you thought you knew doesn't actually exist. Especially if it means that. I looked around the room at faces that reflected my own pain back at me. The hardest cons to spot are the ones run by people we love, because love makes us blind. It makes us ignore evidence. It makes us believe the best in people, even when they're showing us the worst. I loved my daughter. I still love my daughter. But love didn't protect me from her, and it won't protect you from whoever is trying to hurt you. Trust your instincts. Trust the evidence. Trust the red flags. Don't trust love alone, because sometimes love lies better than any con artist. I sat down. Harold Washington was the first to start clapping. Then others joined. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, not because my story had a happy ending, but because it was honest. Because I'd admitted what most fraud victims can't, that sometimes the person who hurts you is someone you'd trust with your life, and you have to save yourself anyway. That night I drove home to my empty house in Chatham, the house Raymond and I had bought together, the house where Jazz had grown up, the house that now held only memories of people who weren't here anymore. I made tea and sat at my kitchen table. On the wall across from me was a photo from Jazz's college graduation. She's wearing her cap and gown, her arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling at the camera. Raymond had taken the photo. "My 2 favorite women," he'd said. I used to look at that photo and feel proud. Now I look at it and wonder when the person in that photo stopped being my daughter and became someone I didn't recognize. Or if she'd always been that person, and I'd just been too close to see it. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Angela Williams. "Saw you speak tonight. You were brave. Coffee tomorrow?" I texted back. Yes. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small connection. A reminder that the world still had people in it who told the truth. I thought about Jazz's letter, about her blaming me for teaching her to be cold, ruthless, suspicious. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had taught her those things. But I'd also taught her the difference between right and wrong, between justice and revenge, between protecting yourself and preying on others. She'd learned the first half. She'd chosen to ignore the second. That wasn't on me. That was on her. I walked upstairs to my bedroom. On my nightstand was the photo album Raymond had made for our 30th anniversary. Pictures of our life together, of Jazz growing up, of family dinners and birthday parties and ordinary moments that had meant everything. I opened it to a random page. Jazz at 8 years old, sitting at our kitchen table, doing homework while I reviewed case files next to her. She's looking up at me with complete trust, complete love. That little girl had used our 3-knock signal to ask for help getting out of uncomfortable situations. The woman she became had used that same signal to warn me away from discovering the truth about her crimes. Same signal. Different meaning. Different person. I closed the album. Tomorrow, I'd meet Angie for coffee. I'd continue volunteering with the fraud victims group. I'd tend Raymond's garden and pay my bills and live my life. And somewhere in West Virginia, Jazz would wake up in a federal prison cell and serve another day of her 12-year sentence. We were both living with the consequences of her choices now. And maybe, someday, she'd understand that those consequences weren't punishment. They were protection. Protection for all the people she would have hurt next if I hadn't stopped her. Protection for her, too, even if she couldn't see it yet. I turned off the light and got into bed. In the darkness, I whispered the words I'd been unable to say to her face. I love you, but I can't save you from yourself, and I won't let you destroy anyone else. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was truth. And after everything, after all the lies and manipulations and betrayals, truth was the only thing I had left to hold on to.